right, thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you everybody for joining me. Today we are going to talk about how you can set up for success in the hybrid or virtual learning space. We will begin with a poll question. Let me see. Do we have the poll question? Could you come up with the poll question? Is it Cheryl? Cheryl, do you have the poll question ready so that we could give a poll for the audience? Oh, okay. Everybody's replying in the chat box. Okay, sorry about that. I think because there was a change in the Zoom link, so we're not able to come up with a poll. That is fine. Thank you. I see that there are some IT, there are some instructors here, um, more IT, non-teaching admin. All right. Thank you so much for replying the poll. Okay, so we are all familiar with the traditional lecture from years ago. A professor walks into the classroom, stood up in front of an audience of students, perhaps at a lecture hall or in front of a whiteboard, and proceeded to instruct, talking to the students and presenting information for a full 60-minute class time. It is 2022, and we have moved into a time in which schools, including administration, instructors, and students must adapt and be ready to adapt to preserve the continuity of education when in-person instruction is interrupted. In terms of flexible learning, students have been asking for greater flexibility when it comes to where and how they learn. For some students, the 100% on-campus in-class model does not work. Maybe they have family or work commitments that they are also trying to juggle. Or maybe English isn't their native language and they want more time to review and digest class material. Flexibility can also just mean that students learn in different ways and like to have choices around how they study and review. For example, at University of the Philippines College of Medicine, instead of sitting for hours of continuous lectures, students prefer to watch the pre-recorded sessions when they want to. The students are not forced to stay in front of their computer or continuously for 4 hours or 8 hours straight. They can complete the courses at their own pace. Online learning became the default in 2020, but the approach most universities employed was a simple remote learning via live Zoom classes, Team, Google Meet, and so on. And by now, we are all familiar with the term Zoom fatigue. Work commitments, career duties, time zone differences, and digital poverty across households can all result in students not being able to attend your classes live. If there is one reflection, relying solely on synchronous learning as a means to online, it has imposed a few challenges. This is why relying entirely on one mode of learning does not fit all. Experts did warn 2 years ago that we shouldn't just take in-person lectures and present them to students online using the same materials and the same strategy. It just does not work. It turns out that most of us went out and did just that because it was the quickest way to deliver learning and not delay the student experience. But is it the best way? Here is an article by Sal Khan from Khan Academy, and he said pure distance learning is suboptimal. Lesson plans designed for in-person classes don't work in this coronavirus world. I don't know about you, but I found it shocking that someone who had built their entire organization around the need for online distance learning would admit that distance learning isn't enough. But he does have a point. Khan Academy was built as a supplementary resource for students who need more information on a topic. It was not built as a core learning experience. Relying solely on synchronous does not work, and so does taking your in-person and making it online does not work as well. If you take a look at this graph, you can see that the live attendance significantly decreased from day one, while viewing lectures asynchronously on Panopto, this one, it increased over the time of the course. Students prefer the flexibility they get with recorded lectures, They can learn at their own pace. They can revisit content they didn't fully understand in the live session. They can take personalized notes, review concepts exactly the way they were presented in class, which is especially helpful right before exams. They can have closed captioning and other accessibility features available to them. And lastly, it allows them to learn the way they prefer. In a nutshell, it is personalized learning. Another reason for the increase in asynchronous learning could even be equality. Maybe they need to download a lecture and watch it offline because they know they have limited access to Wi Fi or a streaming device. Those could all be reasons for the number of students relying on asynchronous lectures to go up. But does that mean it's the way to go? I would argue no. There are drawbacks to consider when teaching asynchronously as well, like lack of engagement with peers, lack of connection to the class material, lack of access to the lecturer for questions. These are all challenges faced by asynchronous learners. So you might be asking, okay, Amy, well, what's the answer? Salkan may have had a point earlier. Distance learning alone really isn't enough, but it is a part of a long term, well rounded teaching strategy. Using synchronous, asynchronous, and in person teaching is the key to learning success in 2022 onwards. I speak with a number of universities every week here at Panopto, and after hearing their challenges and successes over the past year, I strongly believe we need a form of all three delivery options to create a successful learning environment. Have you ever asked yourself, what do students think about going back to a primarily in-person teaching model when the pandemic ends? Well, here's an excerpt from an article highlighting students at the University of Washington in Seattle. Let me read the quote. Requiring synchronous in-person participation disproportionately excludes students whose contexts require more flexibility, like disabled students, commuter students, student parents, and so much more. Let's talk about the different modalities and the best practices for hybrid learning in the technology aspect. The first best practice I recommend is reflecting on the different modes of learning offered, how you've delivered them in the past, and then decide what aspects of the delivery made it successful. This will help you determine the right modality for conducting the learning to meet the needs of both your remote and in-person students. This is, of course, a very time-consuming process upfront, but will help you set up for success and plan ahead in the long term. Here's how you can begin to differentiate them. When considering fully remote but synchronous live classes typically held through video tools like Zoom, WebEx, Teams, and others, the bucket that might fit this in this situation where everyone is attending your class in a remote location. The second bucket is for fully remote students, but the focus here is on the asynchronous delivery or the on-demand one, which is what asynchronous means. This would be best for the bucket of your lessons where your students may need to revisit or revise before an exam. The next modalities that help bridge the gaps between your in-person and remote students are hybrid, high flex, and blended learning. I do want to quickly differentiate between hybrid, high flex, and blended learning since I frequently get asked if they are the same. Hybrid learning is where some students participate in person and some participate online. Instructors teach remote and in-person learners join the same time using technology like video conferencing. Hybrid flexible or high flex teaching is similar to a blended classroom, a classroom equipped with technology that supports remote teaching. The main difference between high flex and blended is the flexibility. With high flex, students are given the option to attend class in person or remotely, depending on their preference and location. Both typically support real-time and pre-recorded lessons. Blended learning is when instructors combine in-person instruction with online learning activities. Students complete some components online and do others in person, so it's not both virtual and in-person learning being offered at the same time. We will dig into how the technology aspect on how this can be implemented, but first, you need to determine where your intended audience is at and what they need to be successful in these modalities. To start, schools need to have the big three technology building blocks: a learning management system, video conferencing, and a video management system. The LMS acts as a central hub for course materials and communications. Video conferencing provides a way for students and instructors to engage in synchronous learning and interact online in real time. VCMS is the asynchronous learning solution in which students can access classes anytime, anywhere. It is also the centralized location to securely create, share, and manage video content. These three technologies work together to create a seamless learning experience for students, whether they are meeting in breakout rooms online, listening to a live lecture they missed, or watching a flip video ahead of class. Panopto's VCMS acts as the connector or central hub between the VC and LMS and improves the user experience of those existing systems. When it comes to single sign-on, auto provisioning, and grade prospect, Panopto's VCMS provides full parity across LMS platforms. With Panopto, you can also add, create, and ingest video without any additional software and without ever having to leave your LMS environment. I would like to share a case study that we did with University of Santo Tomas. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, before that itself, they already implemented blended learning, but it was not 100% utilized. So when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the university had to move everyone online, resulting in the need to implement new strategies that would support the redesign of class materials, instruction, and assessments. In addition, the unreliable internet connection in the Philippines meant that students face a disadvantage at times when trying to access online learning material. With the shift to remote instruction, UST implemented Panopto as a tool to provide interactive, accessible, and engaging asynchronous learning experience through video. On top of that, they also increased a training program to enable their faculty to make more engaging synchronous and asynchronous lessons. And that benefited the students who has internet connectivity issues as they are able to access and watch these video contents at their own pace. The achievement that they got was that they were able to support the learning requirements of 45,000 students. And from the analytics and the data they have gathered from Panopto, they were able to check students' progress, how they watch the content, or the scores from the formative assessments, which has helped UST make data-driven decisions. To provide more context, I am going to play a short video from the webinar we had with UST.
With Panopto, it's actually it arrived at the time when we will be needing it the most. They are our flag carrier when it comes to video management, when it comes to equipping teachers with the capabilities on how to record and edit their videos. And also, it gives us the opportunity to share our contents within our network.
The blended learning approach, we were able to integrate more teaching learning strategies that are also adaptive to the practices and to the experiences of our students.
The internet connection in the Philippines is not perfect. In consideration of that, of course, we want our students to have access to learning materials. And with the availability of video-based content in Panopto, they get to access it even if after they recover from their internet connectivity issues. So they're not being left behind.
Through continued
All right, let me go back to my slides. Okay, to recap, first, we need to reflect on the different learning mode. And second is to look at the three technology backbones. When thinking about the in-classroom session, whether your class is taking place in the classroom, at home, or anywhere in between, There are some things to keep in mind. Video, believe it or not, is the most thought about piece of the puzzle, which is great when it comes to hybrid learning, but not necessarily the most important thing. I would argue that audio is just as important, if not more important than video. Think about what an awful experience it would be for both your in person and your virtual students if they cannot hear you, they cannot hear each other or hear you, the instructor. Even if you're capturing video in 4K, it won't matter because at the end of the day, no one will hear you talking about what is being shown in video. The second thing that's commonly forgotten is capturing whiteboards, or more specifically, explanations done on whiteboards during the classroom session. We've historically ignored capturing what happens on the whiteboard, so lots of times your remote students will hear you talk about what is on the whiteboard, but they won't be able to see half of the information on there because we are often not using the correct tools to capture it, and sometimes they won't see anything at all. That is a gap we can now breach with technology. If you are using a whiteboard in your lesson, or if you are showing how to operate a lab equipment, you want to replicate that experience for your virtual students. Your in person ones can get close to the whiteboard or the equipment to see what you're doing step by step, but your virtual students can't do that, so it is important to have multiple video cameras set up, capturing everything students who are attending in person can see. This way, you can relay the same experience in real time or on demand virtually. So, capturing clear audio and relaying all the different learning methods you are using in the classroom virtually are often the most overlooked pieces of the puzzle. The only difference between the options are the quality of the outputs. One thing to note is no matter what hardware you use, you will need a video conferencing solution in place to have synchronous communication with your virtual students. The fourth question to ask is what kind of insights on the progress of each student can this platform provide? For example, at Samuel Merritt University, the concept of universal design is a crucial focus. Under this initiative, faculty and staff work together to create educational materials that are accessible to all. These videos ultimately expanded across and increased engagement. When they were still doing live lectures, they conducted research on the use of recorded instructional videos. Based on their findings, students were watching supplemental videos with peak usage happening in the time preceding an exam and a quiz. And finally, staff training and development programs with a focus on hybrid teaching and e learning are likely to become more important, as evidently shared by UST. Using e-learning champions can also improve the digital capabilities of staff. These are staff members with the skills and passion to teach and support their colleagues in the use of new technological tools for effective online teaching. I have had the opportunity to work with some e-learning champions from our customers in Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines, and they make use of our trial opportunities prior to making a decision on whether to purchase a platform or not. Out of the world's top 25 universities, 22 of them have chosen Panopto. To be honest, most of these schools are in the West, and it is much different out here in Asia Pacific. The number of languages spoken, fragmented internet connectivity, lower family incomes, and lower institutional budgets, the list goes on. But the trend is changing in Asia Pacific, from Pakistan and India to Malaysia and Indonesia, Vietnam and the Philippines, Japan and Korea, Australia and New Zealand. We can choose to hold on to these challenges, or we can embrace them and find breakthroughs. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure, and I hope it has been worthy of your time. I am happy to open it up to questions.
Thank you very much, Miss Emmy Hasniza, for that informative presentation. Indeed, ma'am, Panopto is very timely, especially during this pandemic. So once again, the floor is open for your questions regarding the topic. So feel free to chat your questions, to post your questions on the chat box. Okay, in the chat box is also the link for the video learning case study from University of Santo Tomas. So, okay. So as there are no questions for now, ma'am, we would like to once again thank you, Ms. Emmy Hasniza, for today. And we hope that you kindly extend our gratitude to Panopto for being our gold sponsor and for being a key partner in making this event possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the session.
Okay, so at this point, may I remind everyone to submit your raffle entry as soon as you can, since we will be closing the raffle at 3:30 p.m. So the link, oh, sorry, ma'am, since Ma'am Emmy, since you're still here, I believe you have one question before we
Yes.
proceed.
I see a question regarding the business model on Panopto. Yes, the first
Yes,
question
ma'am.
that I see is,
Yes,
what is your
ma'am.
business model on Panopto? We are a SaaS platform, so our model is annual subscription. We have an education package, and if you want to talk a little bit more about that, we could connect. We could send an email to connect with you after the event. Thank you. And there's another question about how do we get more info on Panopto.
Yes, ma'am.
I believe that we will be reaching out to follow up, so we could probably connect after the event itself.
Okay, so that would be all, ma'am. Again, thank you
Yes.
very much.